Mm. So, what did you like when you read the script for the first time?
Um, I just, not just, I'd finished Spider-Man a while before, and made those two movies, which made right on top of one another. So there's like 4 years, a little more than 4 years, and it was, it was tricky and wonderful and very, very hard work. And I think when I read this, I just had a very simple, not intellectual reaction to it. I was just like, oh, this makes me feel good, and I could see that it could be made very simply, and I think I craved simplicity after those movies, and I just wanted to do something that would be fun to make, and I that on some basic level was attractive to me. I also like my dad is a math education. My grandfather was a mathematician, so like that I had always grown up with that, so I've had a nostalgic attachment to math. The other thing, in retrospect, thinking about it, like all my movies up to that point were more romantic in nature. Like even Spider-Man, like Peter and Gwen, like there was that romance involved. And I thought it would be interesting to do something outside of that. So, uh, you know, um, the that was all at work, and then um, the challenge of it. I also thought I was like, I just again I like the way the movie made me feel on just some fundamental level. But I was like, in order to get there, you have to find a kid and find a performance that I think it's really hard to find somebody, or it was a challenge to rely so heavily on the performance of a kid, and that was really terrifying to me. I hadn't worked with a kid before like that, and so you know that was kind of like where I spent most of my time focusing as we're developing the script and working on it, is to finding that little girl, and I thought we found a great version of her, But that's what I thought when I read the script. So to answer your question, a very long, random way. But yeah.
So how did you find McKenna Grace?
We had casting people. David Rubin was the casting director. He was also casting. It's interesting. Did you see Big Little Lies here?
Yeah.
So he was casting that, I think, around the same time we were doing Gifted, and like it's funny because a lot of the kids we had seen, some of the girls, while they were casting it, because he kind of had his hands in that pool, so to speak, and we were just. We just did a lot of auditions. I think we saw like 1,100 kids, and McKenna has been in LA for a while. She's like an actor. She's done some TV shows and had done some had small parts in bigger movies, and she just had the capacity to do the emotionally tough stuff, like the crying, and like that stuff, and she could do that in a real way, which. Yeah, but she's also funny. You know what I mean? And she was funny and thoughtful, and like I remember she had an understanding of what the scenes were about, like, and she could embrace them in a much more sophisticated way than I was expecting a kid to be able to do. Like I remember on the first day or earlier in the shoot, her character said like, "I'm sorry," and she's like, I don't think Mary would say I'm sorry right now. I don't think she's in that headspace. I was like, "That I love you. Like this is so impressive that she has that command of her character," and that was a real benefit. But she it was just one of those things, just like a lot of auditioning. Very simple process. It was just really tedious.
Okay.
It's funny because we always hear that it's the worst thing for a director is to shoot with a kid and an animal. Shoot it, both of them
At the same time, yeah.
Yes.
And she was allergic to the animal too.
Oh.
And there were two animals. There's Bob and Marley were the name of the cats that we used. But yeah, but she loves animals, and so that made it a little bit easier, despite her allergies. Though her eyes would get puffy when she was with it for too long. But she was such a professional. Like one of the tricks, like the first you know, first of all, I think the real important thing is that she's just got talent, and she has discipline, and she's a really good kid. But to kind of communicate the atmosphere, I had her watch like Paper Moon, and that was one of the directing cues. Like, we'll do it like Paper Moon, which meant being harder and like a little bit more sarcastic. And she really got that. She watched that movie and ingested it, and like that was a good guidepost for her performance. But the first week, you know, because it's very easy for a performance like that to get too cutesy and too like, you know, the one-liners to be too punchy, and it can maybe take some people out of the movie. So I really wanted to, even at the expense of some of the comedy, to keep it naturalistic. And the first day, or the first week of filming really was done in the classrooms. And what we did was Jenny Slate, who plays Bonnie, you know, prepared a lesson about whatever, and then we brought in all these kids who were not actors. They're just kids from the school, extras, who had never been in a movie before, and they sat in the classroom, and then Mary sat among them, or McKenna did, and we just had her teach a lesson for a couple hours. And we put the cameras in the back of the room on long lenses, and then just every once in a while Jenny would dip into the scene and start asking her math questions or whatever that was, and then Mary would start playing the scene, and the kids had no idea that they, like, when the scene started and when the scene ended. It was just the cameras were sort of picking out moments along the way. But what was interesting about that, I think, was it created an atmosphere of naturalism that McKenna could identify with very easily, and just like it was an attitude. She knew that she didn't have to turn on to perform, that she just was like, it was a kid, and it was it's very easy for child actors to kind of like be Nickelodeon, like, hey, you know, like, and she, I think we managed to avoid that, and I think that was partly, I mean, largely because of her talent, but also the atmosphere on that first week of shooting was, I think, a much more of a documentary, really, and like she managed to kind of weave in the lines into a environment that hopefully felt more realistic.
About the movie, I really liked it because it wasn't a black and white movie.
Mm-hmm.
Even Frank has it's very on agenda, and I wanted to know what side of the family was the more interesting or difficult or fun to work on. Was it the protective but very angry uncle, or the grandmother who was very ambitious and very terrible also?
Yeah, I don't quite think of her as, I think she has a point, you know, Evelyn. I think she has a worldview that just doesn't quite match up with Frank's. I don't think she's a totally villainous, though. I think she's in it for her ego more than she admits, and I think that's what's revealed ultimately at the end. But it was, I mean, it was, we had a good time on both of those things. But one of my favorite scenes in the movie is when they're walking together after the courtroom, and they have a kind of a playful interlude about, you know, his stepfather who's off in Montana, you know, and there's a way that there's a love there, you know, and a mutual admiration. But there's also great animosity and a history that they can't overcome. And that was the most fun part, I think, is dealing with where they intersected, and that people who have an intimate relationship, but really opposing worldviews, coming together in that way. I think that was the fun part. But you know what was like doing that speech when Lindsay was on the stand was really fun. That was like a really fun day of shooting, I have to admit. Yeah. Just because Mommy didn't buy you a little red wagon. I just love the way she did that. It was great.
So how did Chris Evans got into the movie, and did he got to spend some time with McKenna to prepare their relationship?
Sure. Yeah, we we auditioned them together, but Chris was on a very short list of people that I was interested in. He was really got the movie and really he was just totally dedicated to it. And I think he not only had wanted to work with, he likes working with strong female protagonists. That's something that was really important to him. And I think what I liked about Chris in particular is that he approached the simplicity, again, let me use that word, the simplicity of the role. Like there's a lot of nuance going on, but doesn't have a limp. He's not, doesn't have a speech impediment or an eye patch. There wasn't an affect that he had to play. He's just playing a natural guy in a very relatable town in America, and didn't overwork it. And I thought that was a really fun thing with him. And I think like the trick with Chris is, obviously he comes with like the sort of Captain America baggage, but that's not bad. Like that works in our advantage because you want that sort of that picture of masculinity, and then the sensitivity that emerges later on, I think, and the vulnerability that emerges later on is something that I think he had a fun time exploring. And I think like a lot of actors, listen, actors are sensitive people, and it's difficult for men to express that sensitivity. And I think that the movie was a safe place for him to do that. And I think it was required, in a way that it's not necessarily, you don't expect from a superhero movie, or don't really maybe even want in a superhero movie unless it's Andrew Garfield crying, which I loved, but that was I think that was fun for him, and I think that he coincided with, like, the overlap was sort of perfect for our movie.
I was wondering, the original title of your movie is Gifted. In France, it's Mary.
Yeah.
But I was under the impression that it talked so much about the adults were more than it talked about Mary. Is the movie about a child or about an adult, in your perspective?
Well, can it be about both?
Yes, it can.
Yeah. Well, so, I mean, to me, it's ultimately about the. I mean, it is it's really. That's a rhetorical thing. Like it's about the relationship, and I think the person who has the biggest arc is Frank, and like the idea of it, it's not a model about how to raise a gifted child necessarily, and I think if you go into it expecting that, it's not. It doesn't dig so deep into the nuance of what that world is. I think what it is dealing with is how Frank views himself, and whether or not he thinks he's the right person for the job, and whether or not he's worthy to raise somebody. And I think he's been going through life really angry at his mother, and very afraid of creating relationships, meaningful relationships with people, for fear of being hurt, frankly. Like I think he had been abandoned by his mother. I think he'd been abandoned by his father. I think there was very little. There's not a lot of upside to being close to people in that situation. But he found himself stumbling into this deep, meaningful human connection that I think terrified him. And I think that there was something going on inside him that was like, well, I should probably give her up. I'm not the right person for this job. And I think Evelyn exploits that, but then ultimately, through the help of Bonnie and some self-reflection, I think he hopefully gets over that, or he does. I just ruined the whole movie, but it's fine.
Tom break up with Summers.
Mm-hmm.
Gwen dies.
Mm-hmm.
Frank doesn't
Gwen
stay.
dies? What?
Frank don't stay with Bonnie. You don't like love story or what?
Well, there's silence. I mean, you don't really know if they like me. I mean, maybe there's an implication if they get together at the end. I think romance, it's a little too neat. It just depends on the movie, you know what I mean? Like it depends on the movie, it depends on the situation. I think romance, in my experience, is volatile, you know, and energy is not always reciprocated. I think that's a more realistic interpretation of it than the kind of happy-go-lucky situation. I think it's more resonant with people. I think it's more resonant with me. I think I will one day make a movie where people end up together. They might not be romantically involved. Maybe they'll just be trapped in a coffin or something. But yeah, I don't know. I don't know why that is. It is. That's why I guess what I believe. I don't know. It sounds so cynical.
Does the simplicity of the movie explain the success it had in the USA?
I think, you know, the movie is like, it's interesting because I think it's a warm movie, you know, and like, it was designed to be an accessible movie. It's not a particularly intellectual film. I think critics were, you know, generally kind to it, but they were like, you know, if you like to feel good, sure, you can go see the movie. You know, like they were a little sort of like coy about their endorsement of it, and that's fine. But I think I think that I feel good about making pop movies. You know, I feel like it's movies that are accessible. I also think that I approach it uncynically. I also think that it's important to reinforce certain kinds of things in pop movies. For example, like it's about a non-traditional family, you know, and I really wanted to celebrate that. Like the idea, like sometimes our families, I don't know how it is for you guys, but sometimes our families fail us, you know, and the idea that you can create your own family, if with a little bit of effort and some risk, and that can be as supportive as you know, your genetic as your blood. I think that's a really important thing to do, and I think it's a little unconventional. It's not traditional, and I think that the fact that it celebrates non-traditional families is a good thing, particularly at this moment of like, you know, values and more like this kind of like righteous morality that is really present in the States, and I think it's important. We're always struggling with that there. I think that's cool. I think the other thing is like there was just that, you know, I have two nieces, and like, you know, one of them's really good at math, and like there's this weird thing that happens. I mean, the tech industry is a good example of it, like where, you know, women are sort of shut out of that, and it's bullshit, and it's stupid, and it's short-sighted, and I think to make movies, and the movie's not really about women in STEM or women in math, but I think it's cool that I felt really proud that you could have characters, women who are really good at math. You know, I mean, Hidden Figures is a weird thing. Like they made that after we made our movies, but I thought that was cool, and I like that my nieces get to see that, and they think it's cool to do math. And you know what I mean? It's and so putting those messages, which are, I think they are kind of progressive, in a very accessible movie, like it makes me feel good about making the movie, even if it's not like a cinematic masterpiece or particularly cinematically ambitious. You know, it's not like Manchester by the Sea that is so, you know, like really daring, you know, and wonderful, and but like it is a more accessible movie. But I think it's supporting something that I think is important to support and reinforce. You know what I mean? I do think that there's a social component to it that's important for me to think about. I don't know if the audience thinks about it or not. I don't know, but I think it's good to put those ideas out into the world. You know.
Yes.
You said there were two cats to play Fred.
Two cats,
Two
Bob
cats,
and Marley.
Yeah. Was it difficult to find them? And
well, you know, we took their eyes out in post.
Okay.
So when we were casting it, this is so stupid, but like we were looking for a one-eyed cat. And because everybody in the movie is damaged, so like how do you make you need like how do you express a damaged, you know, cat? You can't. It's hard to express the internal conflict of a human, let alone a cat. So we needed some outward expression of that, and we went out. We were gonna put out a casting. This is silly. Put a casting notice out for a cat with one eye, but the animal people were like, "You should be careful about that because somebody may just pluck out the eye of a cat,
Oh.
and because they're like, and just show up with that. So they're like, just don't do it. I was like, oh shit, okay. So we didn't do that. We just ended up spending some money and painting the eye out. I think they did a great job.
Yes.
And was it difficult to shoot with them?
Yeah. I mean, McKenna was a dream. Like, great. They say kids and animals. McKenna was seriously one of my favorite actors to deal with, just on every conceivable level. The cat, like, we had to leave a camera behind with an assistant camera guy, like, waiting there, with his finger on the switch. We don't have, we shot on film, so you can't just let a camera roll, just to get the cat to turn its head.
Yeah.
So, but, and then, you know, McKenna was allergic to the cat too, so it was like, you know, like we were shooting off in another house and doing the Roberta stuff, and like the guy was sitting there with like, it's like, that's filmmaking, sitting there for 8 hours watching a cat move its head. Yeah. CG animals from now on.
I just want to go back on something you just said about the movie. You said that it was very accessible and maybe not so powerful as Manchester by the Sea or Hidden Figures. But I still think that even if it's a summer movie for us, even if it's the end of the summer, it has this very dark spot. And you said that Frank felt that he was abandoned by his mother. And but I also think he abandoned his sister as well, and he's trying to save her again through Mary.
I think he feels enormous guilt about that, and he doesn't want to let that happen again. I think you're exactly right. There is a responsibility he felt. He should have been there to take care of her, but he didn't have the tools to do it. You know, he didn't know what was at stake with her. He didn't. But I think he felt like he owed it to her. Absolutely. Like there's. I think it's a really amazing thing in life when people have emerged from a rough home environments, and that can happen. It's not economics have something to do with it, but not everything to do with it. I think that people can grow up in all sorts of different environments, and if they find a way to give love, to be kind, if they've grown up in a place that does not value kindness, that is a wonderful thing and a really heroic thing. I think Frank is struggling to do that. I think he's learned. I mean, when I talked to Chris about it, like he got that from Mary. You know, you see this innocent thing, and it can't help but to transform you in some way. You know.
Emotions and humanity have a big place in your movies. Is it essential for you for that the audience feel deeply close to the characters?
Yeah, of course. I think, like, I don't think I'm as good at doing comedy stuff. Like, I have friends who are really funny and like can nail jokes all the time. Like, it's so impressive to me. But I something I like, something that I find comforting, particularly for male characters, is to have them crack open at some point, because I think as men we're trained to repress and to be stoic, and I think that's actually important. I think it's important to have that skill, but I think that if I feel, whenever I walk out of a movie and I've cried, you know, I feel an enormous catharsis. You know what I mean? Sometimes I feel a little bit, you know, that I've been tricked, which is not always a good feeling, but I find that a really valuable thing to go to a movie and be able to experience that. It's a catharsis. It's you know what Aristotle was writing about in the Poetics. I think that's a important. It allows you to feel the you know, a large spectrum of emotions and find meaning in that. I think that's you know, I don't know why I'm attracted to that, but I think it's just a sense of release that I really enjoy, and I think that I think it's important. I think, you know, I think movies that are aimed at women or have women protagonists have much easier time using that in more emotional language. I think, but I don't know. I'm always attracted to it when men cry. I think that men like in 500 Days of Summer, Tom gets weepy at the end, and Andrew cries all over the place in Spider-Man, and then he cries here. And it's at a moment of like where they crack open. I don't know. I just love that. I find it really, really meaningful.
So as you said earlier, you like strong female characters, and you also had in 500 Days of Summer, you also had Rachel, so another young child who was really strong. So who are your favorite kids?
Chloe Grace Moretz.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And who are your favorite kids in movies?
Stranger Things kids. Have you have Stranger Things too, right? Yeah. How amazing are those kids? I mean, the everybody. I love the friendship that was at work there. I think that there was a real heroic quality to that, and like it's like another Stand By Me, another great story about friendship. I watched with my nieces recently. It was fantastic. I think I love those kinds of that kind of performance. Really, really warm. Also crying in that movie, but though not in Stranger Things, to my knowledge. Those are some great kids. Those are great child performance. Obviously, Elliot in E.T. I remember watching. You can go on YouTube and look at Steven Spielberg auditioning that kid, and I was like, you can tell they were sort of improvising through that, and that was a lesson. I think McKenna watched that video and understood sort of what was at stake in terms of trying to get that performance when she auditioned, and it was really helpful.
The tone of your movies are so particular. I'm referring, for instance, in Mary, where Chris Evans, it's a powerful scene. He comes and get his cat. Mm-hmm. And it comes back, and in the directly the scene after we show Chris Evans, Frank, with all those cats.
Yeah, the 3 cats.
Like the humor is the humor is important. It's like you know and love the movie codes, but you keep it in a nice way, laughing at them. Where does it come from?
I think that moment, it's funny. Like that moment, when I almost didn't shoot that moment because I was like, is this too much? And I did a cut of the movie without that in there, because this is a really interesting moment because like there were like reviewers. There was a lot of reviewers in America who were just like, ugh, really? Yeah. Like, give me a fucking break. Like this is okay. But when you showed it to an audience, particularly with kids. But actually not particularly with the kids. Everybody, like when you review like what's your favorite part of the movie, that was their favorite moment. And I was talking with Tom about it, and it was like, he's like, well, we get the cat lovers, but it's like, it's not this the cat lovers. I don't particularly like cats, but it's a demonstration of it's a way to dramatize. It comes from a real place, is what I'm saying. It's a way to dramatize a compassion, and it's. That it's actually not easy to do. Like it is like, I think people may think it's a little like not melodramatic but like sentimental. But I'm like, no, you know what, people people crave some warmth like that, some positivity, and I think I felt really good about it. It was really interesting because I had an instinct to kind of pull that back, but when you see it in front of an audience and you experience that with an audience, it becomes very hard to part with, But I think that's just, it's trying to find. There's funny moments that got a big laugh in the audience, which is always very seductive. But I think it comes from a real emotional place, and I think that tends to work really well. But that's the rule, is to trying to make it feel like authentic, like it's earned emotionally. I'm not saying I always am successful at that, but that's the effort,
I have to say the Lego part is quite cool too.
Which with the Lego?
Yeah.
Yeah, when he flips out. Yeah, that was a fun scene to do because but it was kind of weird, so McKenna liked to improvise, and you know, she needed to like we needed to get her to a sort of a fragile place, and she's an 8-year-old kid, like she's a little girl, and I was like, but I wanted her to get a little bit like, you know, a little emotional, and so I told Chris, like, okay, when you go in this take, we're doing her coverage, like, you know, you have to go like tell her that her dad doesn't love her, that she's gonna be like doing all the scenes so we can get her like a real reaction. And McKenna knows it's not real. I talked to McKenna about it, but like it gives her something to react to. And he, like, if you hear what he's saying off the camera, it's like devastating. And she, like, you could see her reacting to it and run away, and like, and it was. It's a way to. That's what's great about McKenna is I felt very protective of her. Like, her mental health is far more important than the movie is, and that's not even it's not even a conflict for me. But what was great about her, and what was unique, I think, about her, and when it comes to someone her age, is she was willing to. You could have that conversation with her, and she understood very clearly where, you know, when what it meant to act, and she could also use the real things in her life to find something more meaningful and more authentic. And it's a sophisticated kind of acting that you don't even see with adults very much. She's a really, I mean, it is a gift. It's a talent that has an intellectual, self-reflective side to it. Like, she's just a really sophisticated human.
Octavia Spencer.
Yes. Yeah.
She has a very small part in the movie, but she's very interesting because I read that she said into an interview that if you refer as the movie as an anatomy, she will be the backbone, and I thought she was very right. So you show her into the movie, but not so much.
Yeah.
But we still understand the story. How do you prepare this character so he wasn't like too much as an accessory?
Yeah, well, she's. I mean, I think when you think about Mary's life, the movie's about family.
Yeah.
Weirdly, you know, and she's the mother.
Yeah.
She's Mary's mother, and so she provides a kind of a softness and an understanding and emotional capacity that. And warmth that Frank doesn't have. You know what I mean? And I think she also understands, I mean, like her backstory, she understood the risks of putting her in school, and like I think that what was important to her was like really understanding what her relationship, the meaning of her relationship with Mary in the context of the movie. And like, you know, backbone, I think is true, but she's the mother. She is a mother in this situation. And I think that was really important to reinforce that. You know, like Bonnie is kind of the intellectual guardian of Mary. Frank is like the dad, and Roberta is she can find joy with Roberta. You know, like one of the scene we did with like there's shame, you know, that singing, the karaoke thing. Like there was a playfulness with her that allowed her to be a kid. And like Frank has a very cynical approach to the world, and like is a little, you know, is sarcastic, and she gets that too. But there's a joy, and that joy I think comes from Roberta. Then Octavia on the set is like she's like she's like sort of she's the one with the most experience there. You know what I mean? So she was kind of like, she just had been around the block more than anybody else, and she was very good with McKenna, and really great for the morale of the crew. She kept everybody sort of happy, and she's also, I mean, she's just like sophisticated, an advisor creatively. Like she was great with McKenna. She was a gifted kid herself. Like she's really good at math. I mean, you can see that more in Hidden Figures. Like that's like, it's very much who she is, and that I think she identified with Mary really well. And that was it. She just helped. You know, in a situation like that, you need your cast to be a family, and like she was really instrumental, not only on screen but off. You know, she's a genius too. Yeah. Everything good? All right. Cool. All right, thanks guys.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you.